Good morning, everybody. This is Christina with Atlantic Institute. I am here today with our Self-Sufficiency 101 class on the Intro to Pressure Canning. This is a very interesting and needed resource for us. And we have with us Heather, that she's going to show us how she does her pressure canning. Heather is a person that I met here in Georgia, that she is a pro when it comes to water bath canning and pressure canning. And she does all kinds of things. And so I'm going to turn this over to Marina. Marina, I want to go ahead and say good morning, and then go ahead and let Heather get started.
Good morning, everybody. You could put in the chat where you're from. I know we only have like 2 people, but
yeah, we'll have more as we get started. All right, so go ahead, Heather, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Heather. I have been born and raised in Northeast Georgia. Spent a lot of time with my great-grandmothers learning how to do some of this. I wish I had paid more attention to them when I was growing up, but I really did not get into this sort of life and self-sufficiency until my 30s. So I kind of wish I had done it a little sooner, but I have enjoyed this journey. And it's really a great way to be more self-sufficient. It's a great way to have prepared meals when you're running behind like I am most days. I pretty much have 2 full-time jobs, so I don't always have time to come in and cook a meal. But with pressure canning, you can have a ready-made meal that all you have to do is pop open a can and maybe make some rice. It is that easy. So it's a huge, huge staple for me in my daily life. And since I'm single now, when I make big batches of soups, that's one of my favorite things to do is soups and chilies. So when I make big batches, I can turn around and pressure can those and have those for those fast meals that I need, especially on a cold winter's day. So one of the first things I want to tell everybody about pressure canning is, I know you've heard how dangerous it can be, how it can, when you're canning, it's hot, plain and simple. There are going to be times when you get minor burns, but you should never get a true injury from pressure canners, especially the newer pressure canners these days. If you're like me, I have older pressure canners that were my great-grandmother's, and I want to use those also just as part of my canning routine. So the local extension offices in counties in Georgia, I'm not sure about other places, but in Georgia, the counties each have extension offices where they will test your pressure canners for you. They will also calibrate your gauges, and your gauges are super important because you have to maintain a specific pressure for a very specific time to make sure that everything is safe. And that is a main priority. You don't want to kill your family. You don't want to get sick yourself. We got to make sure that everything is done properly so that it's all safe. On the counter, I have some of my favorite things to can. So I'm going to start on this side. This is a venison stew. In this jar are chunks of deer venison. There are carrots, potatoes, and onions. Now, in this one, I did put a little bit of beef broth that I made with a beef concentrate and a little bit of seasoning like salt, pepper, stuff like that. Because with this jar, all I do is come in and I boil rice and I got a full meal. Okay. This smaller jar, because you can can in any size jars, but for your meats, I suggest pints or quarts, because anything smaller, it's just not going to hold a lot. So the lowest I go when I'm canning meats is a pint. And this jar is my Mexican pork. So let me tell you how I ended up with this. A freezer went out. I could not afford to lose all of my meat. So I took all of my pork chops, everything, cut them off the bone, and I stuffed this jar as full as I could get it. Now, this is my favorite way to can meat. I don't add anything to it. You want to do raw and you want to do dry because the pressure canning is going to create all of these lovely juices. It's such a super concentrated flavor in this jar that it's delicious. Now, the reason I'm calling this my Mexican pork is because I did season it for pork burritos. One of my favorite things to eat too. So it's got a little bit of Mexican seasoning in it, salt, pepper. You can put anything you want to in them, or you could just leave it plain meat and season afterwards. So this jar is my chicken. It was raw, dry packed, no liquid in here, and you can see how much liquid it has. And there is a level of fat, a layer of fat on top. That's perfect because that's flavor. You don't want to do away with that because it creates flavor. And this chicken, I pop open, I can make chicken and rice, I can make chicken salad, doesn't matter. You can use it for whatever you want, but you want to make sure that you use all of your juices, and every dish you cook needs a tiny bit of fat. You don't have to use all of it. You just spoon it off if you don't want all of it. Now, this jar is fun because I did this jar at the same time that I did the pork when the freezer went out. This jar is sausage and gravy already made. So that's a little more detailed. The sausage is already cooked, and the gravy is a powder gravy mix that you just add to it. And when you do it, you put it in a skillet, and because it's a gravy mix, it's not going to get really thick in your pressure canner. What it's going to do is it's going to bind your meat together. So in the center of this, and you really can't see it, but in the center of this is almost like a pancake of meat. Okay. So when you open it, when you pour this out, you just break up the meat, put it in the skillet, let it simmer and thicken up, and you've got gravy, and all you had to do was make biscuits for Sunday morning breakfast. So it's a great thing to do with excess sausage. This is one of my soups. This is my favorite soup. It's a Mexican chicken soup. Okay. Now, this Mexican chicken soup is finished with butter, and it's finished with a little bit of cream. You do not pressure can those. That's why you're using a gravy mix. I about lit my stove on fire with my rear end. That's why this is a gravy mix, because it's not dairy. So once you put this in your skillet, or you put this in your pot, that is when you add your dairy products. You don't pressure can dairy products. You can. I have pressure canned half and half, but it cannot withstand the temperatures that meat requires. So with pressure can and dairy, and we can do a special on that one day if you want to, because I love to pressure can butter, cream cheese, and milk. So those are staples that we all need in case something happens and we can't get to stores. So that'll be a different episode. But when you are canning meats or your soups, when I make a huge crock pot of this Mexican chicken soup, I do not add my dairy products to it. I add it when I eat it each time, because if I add it, I can't pressure can it and keep it for later. Okay. So one of the first things I want to talk about is the time that meat has to be canned. It does not matter if your meat is already pre-cooked or if your meat is raw. You still have to pressure can it for 90 minutes. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It will not be safe unless you have pressure canned it for 90 minutes. Now, elevation is going to change your poundage on your gauge. Okay, here in Georgia, we maintain 10 pounds of pressure. I believe if your elevation is up like Colorado, I've got a friend in Colorado that pressure cans with me. I think she has to run 12 pounds of pressure for 90 minutes. In Georgia, the standard is 10 pounds of pressure for 90 minutes. I know y'all are looking at these jars and saying, well, they're different sizes. That's because in pressure canners, they're on the inside. You should have these little trivets. And this is very important because if you don't have these with your canner, you can order them on Amazon. And that happens a lot when you buy used canners, and that's okay. But you can buy them on Amazon. You cannot set jars on the bottom of your pressure canner. There has to be a space gap that these create to let the water push through and create that pressure and that steam. Now, when you're pressure canning, unlike water bath canning, you do not cover your jars. Your jars are only covered with water by about a third of your jar. Even if you are stacking pint jars, I'll show you, I can do these. If you are stacking pint jars and you have your trivet, you're still only going to do a third of this bottom jar. That's it. Okay. And once you do that, your pressure canner will develop a line on the inside. Marina, you've got a pressure canner there. If you look on the inside of it,
Mm-hmm.
there should be lines in it. Can you show it to me?
Yeah, I think I see a line, like it's dark, but like right
Dark.
there, I think there's a line.
That is where her water level has been for most things that she cans.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a used one, you can see where your water level is for previous use most of the time. So every canner will do that. But once you have these trivets, this one would go on bottom. Okay. So you're going to set these two jars on top of this one. And then you're going to put your trivet on top of that. And then you're going to do your next layer of jars. It's still 90 minutes, no matter what, no matter the size, no matter how many jars you have in your pressure canner. But your pressure canner must be a minimum of half full. You really do not want to run a pressure canner if there's a lot of room and not a lot of substance to take that pressure. So make sure that when you are pressure canning, even if you need to fill space, because I have to do that a lot, like with my soups, I don't always have 7 jars of soup left over. Okay. So what I will do is I will take this, I will take an empty jar and I will fill it with water. Never hurts to have jarred water, because what if your well goes out? What if your county water, city water gets contaminated and they have a boil?
Use yours because mine will.
So,
Yours
Hi.
will.
welcome, John. So it never hurts to have canned water around. If you don't need canned water and you have bottled water or stuff like that, then you can pop that seal and just pour it out. It's not a big deal. You can reuse your lids. I know that's a very controversial thing, but I will tell you how I reuse my lids, because lids are expensive and there for a while they were really hard to find. So I would take my water bath lids as I open jars and I would mark them. And then I take those water bath lids and use them for pressure canning. So it's kind of controversial, but I have done it numerous times and it's always worked out well for me. One thing for pressure canning you got to make sure of is inspect your jars. I have had jars fail, and that's not a big deal. You're going to end up with a mess in your pressure canner and you've lost some of your food, but the rest of your food is not contaminated at all. So if you have a failed jar, I have a lot of jars that was in my great grandmother's house when I bought it. So use them, inspect them. I highly suggest that you drop them in boiling water, like in your water canner, to test them before you pressure can them. That way, if they're gonna crack, they're gonna crack under the heat in your water canner instead of wasting your food and losing it in your pressure canner. Okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about the top of your pressure canner. So when you get a pressure canner, this one's brand new. I happened to find it on Facebook Marketplace. Got it for a really, really great deal. It's an All-American. If you can find you an All-American canner, I don't care if it's used, buy it. Just buy it. Trust me. Every canner has weights. In your canner, on your canner, you should have a gauge. That's your pressure gauge. You're going to have a vent that will release a little bit of pressure until it builds completely. And then that vent's going to seal off. Okay. And then you're going to have a secondary that is a weight that you set on top of here. So when this weight jiggles and you don't want it fast jiggling, that means you're releasing too much pressure and your heat is too high. So always you have a double way to make sure that your gauge and your weight are coinciding together. Okay. One thing we need to talk about is what kind of liquid, if you're doing liquid, what kind of water goes into your pressure canner. Here is the general rule. If what you have in your jars is hot, like my leftover soup or my stew, then you want hot water in your pressure canner. If it is raw packed, you want cold water in your canner. Because if your jar is cold and you put it in hot water, then the temperature is going to change too quickly, and that will cause some serious breakage. Okay. And it's going to cause what they refer to as siphoning. Siphoning is a big deal with pressure canning. If your meats or soups siphon the juices out, then your canner has come up to temperature too fast. Okay. You don't want that. You do not want that at all. You want to do it slowly. And yes, it's going to take more time. I'll be honest with you. Most of the time that I'm pressure canning, I'm 2 hours or more in one load, because I want that to come up. I want that temperature to come up really slowly. So if my soup was left over out of the refrigerator and it's cold, then my jar is going to be cold. Then I'm going to use cold water. Okay. And I misspoke. This jar of stew was actually cold because everything was raw packed. So I still did that in cold water also. But if you have a leftover stew that you need, go ahead. If it's hot, use hot water. If your items are cold, you always use cold water. I can outside, especially pressure can, outside with an external burner. And the reason that I do that is because there are flaws that can happen. There are things that can happen. Hi, Cheryl, welcome. So these are man-made, no matter what anybody says. We're all human. Everything can have a flaw in it, okay? The last thing you want is for this canner to have a flaw and it blow up your kitchen, okay? It's very rare. These things are made to specifications and they are tested. But it also helps me keep the heat out of my house and the humidity out of my house. And in Georgia, we know during the summertime, that's a big deal. Now, if you want the heat and humidity in the wintertime, slap it on your stove and leave your heat off. Trust me, it's going to get warm by the time that 90 minutes is over and you're going to be good and toasty. But I use an external burner outside, and it's a gas burner. So you kind of have to work with your flame a little bit to make sure it's not too high. Slow and steady wins the race. Okay, especially when it comes to pressure canning. Now, once your 90 minutes has came and gone, you're going to turn your heat off, and you are not going to release the pressure. What I want you to do, and it's very hard for me, turn around, walk away. Go do laundry, cut grass, go do something else. Just leave your stuff in the canner like it is and walk away. Your canner needs to come down and release that pressure. That's what that vent is for on the top of your canner. It needs to release that pressure slowly. Okay, it's going to release pressure off of out of that vent, and it's going to release pressure out from under this weight. That's what the weight is here for, is to help that pressure get released slowly. And that's why it jiggles. When it's going too fast, it's going to jiggle really hard and fast. Or when it's too hot, you lower it to where you just have a very low jiggle. Walk away from it. When you see that your gauge has zeroed out, that is when you want to open your canner. And that is like a aha moment. You have just done this. It's still going to be very, very hot. Okay. You may open your canner, one of your jars busted. It happens. Not a big deal. Pull all of your good ones out, set them on a counter so that they can continue to come to temperature, come cool down to room temperature, and you're going to hear your jars pop. Now, with pressure canning, your jars are going to seal and pop a whole lot faster than they normally do with water bathing. So it's going to ping pretty fast, and that's okay. I usually leave mine sitting on a counter, just the regular counter with the rings on. I leave them sitting on the counter for a full 24 hours. I don't touch them. I don't put anything over them. I just let them sit. After that 24 hours is when I take my rings off and I put them on my canning shelves. And we're done. I've got my meals for those long days. And in all honesty, I can take that jar of soup with me to work. Heat it up and take the lid off, throw it in the microwave, have soup for lunch, or between my two full-time jobs. So it's really nice to just have a ready-go meal in a jar if that's what you want, or that's what you need for your busy schedule. So at this point, I think the best thing to do is for us to kind of discuss questions.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question. The weight. When you get everything ready, and so you've got your cans in there, you've got them layered, you've got a third away up of water, you put your lid on, right? Let's just say I'm starting with cold, right? So then I'm going to turn the stove on. After I put the lid on, then I'm going to turn the stove on, is what I'm just thinking, one of the things I'm thinking. And then that weight goes on top of that.
The weight, let me show you how this one works. I didn't pull it out while ago. I can show you the weight. This one, yes, your weight's going to be on it from the very beginning. It does not have to vent. And most weights, a lot of them are round like this. I think Marina's is a little different, and she can show it
Marina,
too.
can you show your weight?
Yeah.
This has, yes. Now see, that is an aftermarket weight. And you can get those on Amazon if you've lost them. And they're really cool because you can change the weight. You just twist off the top and the rings come off to adjust your weight. This one, manufacturer weights, has a 5, 10, and 15. Most of the stuff that we're going to do in Georgia is always 10 pounds pressure. So you're going to find your mark for 10, and each weight has a hole. It's all about how it's balanced. So you literally just leave it right there. Leave it on that edge. And as it starts heating up, it'll start to shake because that steam is pushing out. And that's when you know you're starting to build your pressure. Even if you don't have a gauge. I have one of my great grandmothers that does not have a gauge at all. So I have, as a matter of fact, it's my favorite one to use because I don't have to worry about a gauge being calibrated. It
Okay.
purely goes off of the sound of this weight and how much steam is being pushed out of that weight.
All right. Yeah, I was going to ask because that's how you know the heat level outside is by how quickly it's dinging back and forth. You know, it's too hot. You need to lower it because you want a steady ding 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 ding. You want a steady like little.
Really don't. You want it to pause. You want it
All
to
right.
pause. It should, I call it kind of a jiggle because that's
Uh-huh.
what they are, they're jiggle weights. So it should jiggle for just a second to release the pressure off it needs, and then it should stop. And then it should jiggle again. And that's how you know that your pressure is not too high. If it's a constant jiggle, then your pressure, your heat is way too high. If it's not jiggling at all, once it's come up to pressure, then you've lowered your heat too far.
I
So you're
gotcha.
at middle ground where there's an intermittent jiggle.
Have us asking that you said they've only canned vegetables, which is water bath. And so what's the shelf life of pressure canned food?
Pressure canned food will at minimum last you 5 years. But what you have to be careful of this day and time is that some of these lids are not made the way they used to. And I'm
Right.
a prime example. This is a ball lid. And do you see that rust right there where it's breaking down? This did not have a ring on it, and it still did that. So my suggestion to you is to keep an eye on your canned goods. And I don't know about y'all, but I love going to look at my canning shelf. I know Christina's seen my canning shelf, and it's just beautiful. I love to look at it. So I go up there every once in a while because it's in a different house. I don't have room in this one. But I go up there and I test the top of my lids because you will have lid failure sometimes too. So you always want to just kind of rub your hand over it, make sure it's not protruding, make sure that it won't come off if you just touch it. Okay. Because these lids are not made like they used to be. I mean, I have run across canned food here since I bought my great grandmother's farm, and that canned food is 30 years old. Still sealed, still looks just like it did. I haven't eaten it, but I honestly feel like I could. Like, these are long-term solutions as long as everything is sealed good. And these were what I'm talking about were green beans. So when you open them, they're going to be mush after 20, 30 years. Okay. So they're not really edible, but you probably still could. I don't let anything go past about 5 years. So
So
I pull all my stuff up to the front that's older.
so that one there that's got like rust on the edges or on the top, would you pull that one and maybe eat that one first?
I
Because it's
would.
still right, and then that lid's gonna get thrown out, I would think.
This
Yeah.
this will not be reused for anything unless, well, this one's not gonna be reused for anything because of the way it looks. Now, a lot of my pressure can lids and stuff I will use to reuse for stuff that I keep in the refrigerator because I make homemade dressings and I store them in mason jars. Those lids don't have to seal. They're just living in a refrigerator. So that's a great way to extend the life of your lids. Don't automatically just throw them away. I have done crafts with rings that were rusted. I have reused my lids for stuff that goes in the refrigerator. And I don't know if y'all know the trick about your fruit in the refrigerator.
Yeah, yeah. Does everybody here know about the trick about that? That's your fruit. You need to put your fruit in mason jars.
Yes, it will last you 3 times as long and it cuts down on waste. So any vegetables, any fruit that is fresh that you buy from the grocery store, if you take it and you put it in a mason jar, and this is a great way to use some of your jars that you may not feel is safe for pressure canning, but you literally just take one of your older rings and one of your older lids and leave it in the refrigerator. That way it doesn't matter if it's perfect, doesn't matter if it has that little bit of rust, that one is way too far. Like, I will end up using that jar probably this week because when I went up to get some of my stuff to bring down for this class, I was like, that one needs to be used. So I always check them and I move my older stuff to the front. All of the newer stuff that I can goes directly to the back. and I keep all of my meats on one shelf. I keep all of my vegetables on one shelf, and I even have a separate section for my already made meals. So that I'm really not searching when I go in there. Because, you know, I don't want to dig through all the pickles and the green beans to find my beef stew.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that's just personal preference.
So question for you, the lids. I've had a couple that I've water bathed, and I've noticed like I check the lids to make sure that the seal is all good and that the edge isn't like chip bent or anything like that before I go to water bath. But sometimes I might see that the lid might have a little bit of like a scratch with like some rust, like maybe a little bit of a rust forming. Would you use that lid or would you not use that lid?
The inside, it's on
Yeah,
the
on the-
inside. I wouldn't use it because it's not going to last you long term. Your
'Cause
lids need to be pristine. And just like I'm talking about reusing my water bath lids for pressure canning,
Right.
I have a very specific way that I open my lids so that I don't crimp an edge, because once you crimp that edge, they're not usable except
stuff.
for in the refrigerator.
Okay, so how do you open your lid? Because sometimes I can't get it open, and I've used the side of the can opener, you know, that has the little thing that you would use for like a bottle, you know, and I just kind of like gently let some air in there and break my seal. But I know that that can kind of crimp the edge. So
Yeah. So the way that I open mine, let me move this and I'm going to show you. I use butter knife, and sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. And it's okay if I crimp this lid. I'm going to try not to, but I always take the back of my butter knife and literally just pull up. It doesn't crimp because the butter knife puts pressure in a bigger space
even
than, yeah,
along.
a little more even than this.
Right.
You see,
Yeah.
because this is going to put pressure all in one place. So
Right.
you can do it with a butter knife, or you can even do it with a spoon, according to how thick your spoons are.
Right.
And I literally just pull. And this one, I guess because of what it's rusting, it's not going to do it. But this would be one I'd have to open with a can opener or with that pop, just because I'm gonna throw it away anyway. So I was hoping it would do it and I could show you, but apparently the meat is still good in here. But yeah, it's pressure canned really well.
Okay, but I get that that butter knife puts pressure evenly across a wider area, so it won't. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So anything that you can use that'll give you a little bit wider area to put it on, it's going to help you to keep from damaging that lid.
Right.
A
I've
lot-
had people
Go
I've
ahead.
had people give me back, like if I've given them some canned food, I've had them give me back the jar with the ring, but no lid. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm like, oh, I guess that's because it used to be you threw out the lid, I guess,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, and if you ask USDA standards, they're going to tell you to do away with the lid. I will tell you that it is hard to reuse pressure canned lids. I don't reuse them for anything but the refrigerator. Okay. Because they do end up sealed so tightly, and you can actually see I did dent that one just trying to open it. There's now a dent right there. So this one would get thrown out anyway. But once you use a lid for pressure canning, it's not good to use anymore. The only
Right.
reason I reuse the water bath ones is they're sealed, but they're not pressured. They're going to seal and they're going to be safe. They have a lot less of a shelf life in water bathing than you do in pressure canning.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Having a method to it all.
Right. And that takes time to develop whatever works for you, because what works for me may not work for everybody else. And I'm pretty conscious about, I have different baskets for different lids. If I know it's a water bath lid that I have used that goes into a different basket, I know I can use that for pressure canning, because lids get expensive. So
Right. All right, Marina, I'm gonna let you take over questions. Asking for anybody for questions, I'm gonna go run. I'm gonna put myself in mute. So I'm gonna let you. Thank you, Heather, and Marina's gonna go ahead and take over questions for everybody. All right.
Okay. Are the rings like when you take off the rings, is that an important part, or can you leave them on?
It is an important part because what the rings do is they can hold moisture. If your house or whatever storage facility you are canning or you are having your cans stored in, mine is in an old house that is on my property that was my great grandmother's, and this ring right here has some rust on it, and that is from it
Yeah.
holding underneath. So if you
Mhm.
take your rings off, one, it's going to help you make sure that your lid is sealed under its own weight, that the ring is not keeping it sealed. Because if the ring is keeping it sealed, then it may not be safe. So if you always want to take your lids off, or your rings off, so that your lids, if it happens to fail, you're going to know it pretty quickly. Mainly by the
Okay.
smell.
Yeah. Um,
Anybody else got a question?
I don't have any more. If anyone else has a question, you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can put it in the chat and I will read it to her.
Hi, I do have a question. You said that the water bath doesn't have the same shelf life as the pressure.
Correct.
Um,
And that is,
canning.
uh-huh.
Oh, I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. The reason I'm going to tell you that is because the new lids, if it had been a lid from the 80s or 90s, I would say it's probably still good. But these days, the lids are not made as well, just like most things that we have now. They're just not made as well, and they're not meant for that long shelf life. So water canning, you have a seal, and it is a perfectly safe seal. And there are a lot of things that do not need to be pressure canned. If you pressure can them, you're just overcooking them. So water bath is optimal for those ingredients, but they usually only last max about 2 years.
Okay. So then another question I have, is when you're talking about meat, like chicken, you buy the whole chicken and or how do you do that?
And I will tell you, when I do a whole chicken, I cut it up into pieces and I put it in a quart jar. Now you're going to get about a half a chicken in a quart jar with the bones. And you want your bones because your bones are going to release that flavor and that collagen that have such good health benefits. So anytime that I see something on sale, like one of my local grocery stores loves to do leg quarters on sale. So that consists of a chicken leg and a thigh. And then I will buy some breast meat to go in there with it. And that is a soup base for me for my Mexican chicken soup. So I can pull it out of that jar, debone it, and use it as a soup base. A lot of people may not want the bones in there. No, I leave the skin on because remember we were talking about this level of fat right here? This level of fat is delicious. You don't have to use all of it, but there's a lot of flavor packed into this little layer of fat right here. And I always leave my skin on my chicken. Now, with beef, venison, all of those, I trim a little bit more. Venison usually doesn't have a lot of fat, but what it does have is this white skin that can be pretty tough. So I always want to make sure that when I cut up my chunks, I'm taking as much of that off as I can. But what I have learned with canning it is that it does away with that toughness because it's under so much pressure. But I love canned meat because if you have a tough piece of meat, like part of my self-sustainability is my chickens. All of my roosters get canned. because they are, not always the most tender meat. But one way to make them tender is to can them. So I will get about a half a rooster per quart jar.
Okay.
Travis
Oh,
said
sorry.
skin off. I don't know if you just answered that question or not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I did. Just
Okay.
I take the skin off. The skin is where a lot of flavor in your fat's going to come from.
Okay.
Tosca, did you have another question?
I was just gonna say, like, can you can hamburger?
Absolutely. Now, when my freezer went out, just like this meat here, for the sausage, I had some hamburger meat because I process cows. I usually do about 1 cow a year. And then I have pigs processed because I want to know where my meat's coming from. But I eat a lot of chicken. So I buy chicken from a store. But with the hamburger meat, I will tell you this. It is it's a texture you have to get used to. And my suggestion to you, if you are doing it, is that you raw pack your hamburger meat and then you cook it. It's basically going to turn into a meat cake shaped in a jar. I put mine in a hot cast iron skillet, break it up, so you get some of that texture of it being freshly brown. But you can do sausage patties, pre-patties. You can do hamburger patties in wide mouth quart jars. And my suggestion for doing those, if you're going to do pre-patties, is to flash cook them. You don't want them fully cooked through, but you want them enough to where they're going to stay together and be able to put them in a jar. And then you pressure can them for 90 minutes. You open up that jar, you pull one patty out at a time, slap it in a skillet, and finish it off. It's already cooked, but the texture of it can be unappealing if you don't do that browning before you serve it.
Yes, like most canned things.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, this has been very interesting, and you guys have done a wonderful job at hosting it, and you have been. I know I'm going to have to rewatch this on YouTube to get all those details, but this has just been great. I'm anxious to get started.
Very sorry if I went through it quickly. I knew we had just a very limited time, and I want a lot of people do better if they can ask questions. So I wanted to see what the questions were of everybody watching as quickly as we could. But I hope you do watch it again, and I would love to know how your first adventure goes. And if you need any if you have any questions and you need any help, Christina knows how to get in touch with me, or just message me on Facebook.
Well, perfect. I appreciate it because I'm converting. I have gone from vending machines to, where
Yeah.
I'm coming to now. So it's kind of a process, but I'm retired and have this kind of time, and I think it's so much healthier.
Yes. I started this when my children were smaller to be able to have meals without them having to eat fast food all the time. So, it was easy for me to do the quick meals and come home. I worked 12-hour shifts in law enforcement at that time. So I could come home, I could pop open a couple of jars, and in less than 30 minutes have a full-blown meal.
Wow.
What? Where is it? Upstairs in the closet. The bee suit? Which one? Upstairs. Yes. Sorry. Sydney's not
Life
here.
goes on.
My partner came to get a bee suit. Apparently, somebody has to work some bees right now or catch some bees. But so I apologize for that. Any other questions?
Well, I know I'm going to have some questions, and I appreciate that we can contact you and make
Absolutely.
sure, because there's a lot to this.
There is, and a lot of people get intimidated by it, but once you do it the first time, it's kind of like you have gotten over that hump. It's just start out slowly, make sure that your heat is consistent, and do not heat it up too fast. That is key to pressure canning. Is it has to come to temperature slowly, and it has to come down slowly. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a lot of siphoning and wasting of your food and possibly burned jars.
Ah. And do you know of a company that might um, be a better product than others, like ball jars? Are they
Lids
better
anymore.
quality?
Yeah, I don't buy ball lids anymore. There is a company online. It's saved in my browser. If y'all will message me, I will get it. Liam's. If you go online to Liam's, they have bulk lids. I buy them by the sleeve, and their lids have been, I don't want to say fail proof, but they have a lot less failure rate than ball lids do.
Oh,
And they come in a brown bag. I'll show you. This is a tiny piece of a sleeve. Like the sleeves are literally this long.
Oh.
So, and it's either regular lids. They don't have any markings on them, and I don't know. Honestly, I cannot tell you where their lids are made from. I can only tell you that I know that Ball changed their manufacturing, and even on their boxes now, it says only for use for up to 18 months. So that tells you right there that they've changed their manufacturing. They've changed their I don't know any other word to say it, but glue that's underneath here. So it doesn't stay sealed as long. So I have just kind of given up on Ball, and Liam's has been my source since 2018.
Ah.
So
well, all right. That's good information because, they are very expensive, and I know they are hard to find.
they are. And Liam's has always been really good. I didn't, even during COVID, I didn't have a lot of like delays, but luckily my birthday was right before COVID was deemed. And for my birthday, I had bought me a big sleeve of the regular lids and a sleeve of the wide mouth lids. So I didn't have to worry about that until the next year. And I usually buy about a sleeve a year because I can, good year, I can any around 500 jars a year.
Wow.
But
And
that's, it's not all meat, it's not all pressure canned because I can green beans and all of my tomato products. I can't eat commercial tomato products. So anything that is tomato based, I have to make myself.
So how long does that last you?
Well, since my divorce, it's lasted a lot longer, but he did take half of my canned goods in the divorce. That tells you how used to he was of eating it. So, this year I haven't done a whole lot with working 2 full-time jobs, but this winter and anytime that I find meat on sale, I check out my local small grocery stores because usually the meats from there are a lot better, or we have a new local butcher shop. So anytime that they're running specials or sales or anything, I'll go get it. And it is just me. So I'll can it. And I end up with these little jars, to do stuff with. So that's it. It's truly is my source of how I eat daily.
Well, I don't know. After he runs out of his canned goods, are you going to resupply him?
Yeah, no, ma'am. He took a canner too. He got a canner in the divorce. And some jars and some rings, but he's responsible for his own lids and figuring out how to do it. So we'll see. I got a feeling he's gonna be asking me questions too. And
Well, I'm a
Oh.
retired divorce attorney.
yeah, we have children and we have grandchildren, so you know, we've got to be able to get along and communicate with each other, and it's just the best way to be anyway. So can I ask y'all a question? What can you put in the chat what kind of pressure canners you all have, or if you haven't even bought your first one yet? Because I'm just curious to know the different brands, different types, that kind of thing.
Well,
I
that
have
I
no
can't
clue
help
which
you.
one we have.
Tosca, what kind do you have?
I don't have one.
You don't have one yet?
Yeah.
I recommend Presto makes a really good one.
I was
Now,
gonna say this one's Presto.
yeah, that
That's
one's
what
Presto.
that says.
Figured that one was because I've got one just like it. I have a total of 5 right now. So it was okay that he took one with him. But, and that's because I do large amounts of meat or large amounts of meals at a time, and I've got a double burn external burner outside. So I usually have more than one thing going at a time. But if you do not have one, please, please, please understand that when you are looking for one, there is granite wire or granite ware. I've never heard of that one. Make sure that you know the difference between a pressure cooker and a pressure canner. You cannot pressure can in a pressure cooker. Okay. That is very, very important.
I did not know there was a difference. So thank you for that.
There is a huge difference. Pressure cookers are meant for short-term pressure cooking, and canners are made thicker. There's a fruit fly in my house. 12 quart is not too bad. You can do plenty of pints and stuff in that. So, I mean, if you have, she said hers was small, that granite ware was small, it was just 12 quart, but you can do your pints, your half pints, all of that stuff. Is it big enough for your quart jars? Maybe just what, 4 at a time? But make sure that when you go to do this, that you have, it is too short for pressure, for quart jars. I thought it might be, but you know, if it's just 2 of you or just 1 of you or whatever, then pint jars work. A pint jar of meat is a lot of meat, just so you know. A quart jar of meat is a lot of meat. So, make sure it says pressure canner, because Presto makes pressure cookers also, but it has to say pressure canner. They're just made hardier. They're a lot heavier. I know they're hard to deal with some of us who have grandchildren and stuff, and we are struggling to pick them up with water, full of water. But you can get the smaller ones so you don't have to do such large amounts at a time.
Would you have a brand new pressure canner tested by the extension?
I wouldn't. I'm from the manufacturer, already tested. The gauges are already calibrated. The only reason that I'm taking the ones that I'm taking to the extension office this year is because they were my great grandmother's. And we're talking about pressure canners that were made in the 60s. So I need to make sure that those gauges are correct, because when you're pressure canning meat, you're going to rely on those gauges a lot. But like I said, now my favorite one, because I've been doing it so long, does not have a gauge at all. It just has the weight, and I kind of like it. I, do something outside, and I can hear it going off and see if I need to adjust it according to wind. And my burner has wind guards, so it doesn't get affected too much.
Well, thank you so very much.
For joining.
Um,
It
our
looks like
time is pretty much up. So does anyone have any more questions that they want to ask before we go?
all right, guys.
Well, you can unmute yourself and say thank you to Heather, or you can put it in the chat. Havis, I think that's how you pronounce your name. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. We will put links and stuff. So thank you for asking that. But when we put it on YouTube, there will be links.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate it. And I'm gonna tell you, like I told Tosca, if you have any questions, find me, ask Christina. She can send you toward my page. I'm more than happy to answer questions. It might just take me a little bit to get back to you because of the jobs, but I will get back to you. And just try to give me a little bit of an advance notice. If you watch again and you have any questions, just message me. I appreciate all of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
It was
so
really
much,
great.
everyone.
This is
I
John
will
from
be in touch.
Great, thank you. It was a great Zoom. Very good.
John,
Thank you.
thanks. I appreciate all of you very much. I hope you had a good time. And if we do this again, I can talk to Christina and see if we can do different subjects like the dairy and stuff.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to learn about. And now I'm more interested in all of it.
All right, guys. Have a
So
great-
thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. And I think I just end it. I'm not fully aware. I don't know if I stop the recording now or at the end.
Go ahead. That's fine. I will talk to y'all soon. Thank you, Marina, for your help.